Thank you. All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's Village Square. My name is Claudia Rempel and I am the operations manager at the Lopez Island Library. The Village Square is a program series that is a collaborative effort between the Lopez Island Library and other community organizations to keep the people of Lopez informed about the local responses, relief efforts, and recovery movements taking place in reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our evening will be moderated by the Lopez Island Library's high school principal, Martha Martin. So I'm going to turn this over to her. Thank you, Martha, and welcome.
Hello, Lopesians and anybody else tuning in tonight. Thanks for coming to the Village Square. That is all about what school will look like in the fall for the students of the Lopez Island School District. And I want to thank the Lopez Island Library for hosting this event. And I may or may not have agreed to do this just so I would have an opportunity to come inside the library, because I moved here during, right at the beginning of this pandemic when everything shut down, including the library. And it's lovely in here. So thanks to Ingrid and Claudia for their warm welcome. I want to introduce the panelists. I'll tell you really quick that we have Brian Auckland, our superintendent and elementary principal, with us tonight. Kathy Booth will be representing special services. Jesse Hammond will be representing technology, of course. We have a board member, Guenther, and John Shaw will be talking to us about kitchen wizardry in the fall and our school lunch program. And Richard Tetu and I are representing the left and right brain of the secondary wing. You may know this already, but I believe that if we took a peek inside Richard Tetu's brain, we would find an entire section specifically devoted to the Lopez Island secondary schedule, organized by year and date. So this is how this is going to go tonight. Each one of these people is going to tell a little bit about the restart plan, what we know, questions we still have, and then, from their perspective, in their role. And then we will answer questions that have come to us ahead of time. And then we will answer the questions that you are able to submit during the event using the Q&A button at the bottom. So let's start with our superintendent, Brian. Brian, will you tell us about the general plan for restarting in the fall?
Yeah, happy to. And thanks, Martha, for hosting this. Well done. And I want to thank the library for just, organizing this and having a platform for us to be able to engage with the community in a way that we can help get information out to our families. Ultimately, we all want our kids safe and learning here coming up this fall, and this is our opportunity to do that. The school board made the decision based on our county health official to go to the virtual learning model here this fall, and staff have been working on the three plan options directed by the state, and that's what we're here to talk about, is this three plan option. And in more detail, we want to talk more about the virtual learning option as we move forward. We'll also send more information out about that as we continue to work that process. So this is one of those scenarios where things are evolving, and with each week, new information comes to us and we make adjustments and adapt to that. Before I get too far into the plan, though, I want to recognize just kind of our school email messenger system. Last year, when we made the decision to prep everything, get ready for that messenger system to switch over to the new model, which all schools across our state are doing, it's called the cumulative, and or the Q for short. But that model, we did not think we would be in a pandemic when we made that 10-day window of transition time. So my apologies, communication has been very difficult to get out, and the program continues to update. And so we've been loading and getting things ready for that. So definitely an unforeseeable inconvenience, and we apologize that this has been an inconvenience during this time. Usually during our normal school years, there isn't a lot going on this time of year, and not a lot of emails need to get out. So like I said, a year ago, it was a great idea and a great week, but we'll be done here soon, and your family should be receiving just kind of a notice of how to connect with that, and just follow the directions. If you do have any questions, Lori Jardine is our point person and does an amazing job getting this up and going. So she's a great resource there. With that, I'd like to dive into the plan a little bit. We are going to spend, well, there's an overview basically that I sent out earlier this morning, and just kind of outlining what, in particular, what that virtual model would look like. And the intent of that overview is to give you just a big picture snapshot of what we'll be doing and looking at, and some of the options that we've considered. Obviously, there's a lot more detail to it, and we just posted on our webpage, if you wanted to go there, the full plan itself. It is in draft form. It's 35 pages. Encourage you to take a look at it and offer feedback. This is still a living document at this point. The school board has a special board meeting on Thursday scheduled to help, along with a little more dialogue and clarify a few questions and add more to it. We've also got a session where we're meeting with our students, our ESB students, and wanting to get their feedback on the plan as well. As we get closer to the start of school, you're going to start to hear from teachers about schedules and more information about what virtual learning will look like, and we'll keep giving you information as we work through it. That being said, we're still getting information from our county and updates, and so things will continue to change. So we are knowledgeable that the plan is coming together, and we're also interested in being as accurate with this as possible. With that, guidance from our county health official, Dr. James, is the one who directed us to do the virtual learning. And as you know, all San Juan County schools are doing virtual learning here this fall. We hope to have we'll have a clear plan in front of you shortly, and we're getting pieces out about that for that virtual learning model. In addition, we're really kind of looking at how we can partner and collaborate with our outside organizations. And so we'll get into that in our plans a little bit, but want everybody to know that, you know, as we continue to partner with the county health department, we are working on safety first. We're following county protocols for safety, and just making sure that we're knowledgeable about that area and implementing those protocols, as well as creating a virtual learning model that supports our students and their learning needs. And virtual learning is going to be different. We know that this last spring wasn't perfect, and we appreciate everybody's patience with that. And we know we had some things to really address and improve upon from this last spring. And so we've had more time to be able to work out a plan. That being said, nobody's done this before in our nation, and it's a pandemic, and so we're trying to navigate the best plan we think that will help both Lopez students and staff and families navigate a learning model for this coming school year. With that, I think, Martha, I'll turn it back over to you, or I'll turn it over to Mr. Tetu.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Richard, would you please explain the collective brilliance of the secondary wing for us, please?
As early as actually February, when the news came to us that we may have to go remotely, we started talking about this. How do we adapt in our very small school? We're considered a small B school, which is as small as a level of school you can get. Small secondary school, how can we adapt to teaching remotely, or what they call a hybrid model, part remote, part at school, and back to school? And being able to move between those models more seamlessly. And we also had a survey that some of you filled that showed us that there were some problems with the way we had been trying to deliver instruction between March and mid-June. For example, many of you felt overwhelmed by the amount of communication you were receiving. Some of you felt, and your children felt, that the number of classes could be overwhelming. And the delivery of those classes was overwhelming. So many of us got together and started reviewing how can we address those concerns and deliver even better instruction. We researched, we talked. I cannot speak for everybody else. In my case, my daughter, my son, and my daughter-in-law are teachers. One teaches in a large district, Federal Way, at the elementary level. their elementary school has, will have 500 and some students, I think, next year, with 93% free and reduced lunch load. Non-ELL in her class one year was a 21 ELL and 2 native English speakers. My son, my daughter-in-law teach in Linden, which is, believe it or not, Linden is now more of a city, large high school, but between Federal Way and Lopez, and then Lopez. And I dug their brain. That's one example. All the other teachers in secondary came up with feeling. What do other people do? What can we do? And we came up with a plan that we feel gives us so many benefits that I find it's almost magical. It's a little miracle we got here, because it addresses lots of the concerns parents have. It has many advantages, and we can hop back and forth. Literally, we could have Monday, we're back, let's say it's Monday, February, whatever. Let's say February 3, I don't know if it's a Monday. And oh, lo and behold, bad luck. Somebody come down with something. We have to shut down the secondary. It's okay. Tuesday morning, boom, we can switch back, and parents would not be overwhelmed. So how do we do this? First is we decided to throw away all that was not essential, that was not mandated, and we decided, what do we have to do to meet state law, federal law, our district procedures and policies, what has to be met, and what do we know is great. And what we found out is we could redivide the year into 7 terms of roughly equal length, and overall by the end of the year it balances perfectly. We meet the state requirement, we meet all requirements. During those 7 terms, we teach the 7 courses the secondary take, but we do it in a novel way. The first term, which is different, no, let's face it, it's going to be for everybody. 6th to 12th grade, it's going to be difficult a little bit. First term, 1 class is taught, and many of the adjuncts that would help be successful. So you'll be taking 1 course with 1 teacher, and it fulfills all kinds of great things. First, less communication for kids, less communications for parents, not being overwhelmed. You don't have 7 teachers contacting you, you have 1 teacher contacting you. Trying to make sense of your personal productivity, calendars, to-do lists, assignments, schedule, 1 class. We can flip-flop, we can go online, hybrid, all at school. I mean, no problem, that works. No problem with that. I'm not going to go on forever. If you look at the long document, eventually you can see there's many, many, many reasons. I think we ended up with over 20 reasons why this worked wonderfully well for us. And then the remaining 6 terms for the rest of the year, we go between A, B, C, D, E, F. 3 classes each term, and they come back and forth. So if a kid in term 2, for example, taking A, B, C, and in class A, they're struggling. Well, at the end of those 5 weeks, it's okay. The year is not over. You're not doomed. Now the next 5 weeks, while you're taking D, E, F, you can get some remediation on the classes you have problems. And when A, B, C comes again, you're back on track. You're caught up to your friends. Also, that means now you have at most 3 classes that you, your parents, your guardian have to talk about. And in all this, if we're lucky enough to get back to school, whenever we get back to school, we're back in the building, instead of the kids mingling with 7 groups, the most they mingle in is 3 groups. So we reduce the chances of the kids catching something. I could go on for a long time. I mean, if those of you who had the chance to maybe take some courses at post-secondary, you know that if you're able to focus on 3 classes instead of 7, so much more powerful. As a teacher, if you're an instructor, you know that if you're able to focus on 3 classes, it's very powerful. Again, I cannot speak for all the other teachers. My personal experience, no, I think, well, this year I'll have 7 preps in a way. That's a lot to prepare for. When I talked to my son when he was teaching at Mount Si, 1 prep. It's a lot easier to prepare that way. And then when you have to answer a question, it's a lot It's a lot easier to answer the questions. You also can pace yourself in some ways that you can't do otherwise. I don't want to take the whole evening on this. I just want you to understand that the year divided into 7 terms. We start with the first term, 1 course, and then the remaining 6 courses alternate for the rest of the year in roughly equal amounts. It will not affect your calendar. It will not affect your vacation. It will not affect your plans that you may have had to go somewhere. It fits within that. And then within the week, within the weekly schedule, again, responding to the concern of people, the schedule is no longer, okay, this is A, B, C, D, what's going on today. First term, you only have to worry about 1 course. And that course, most of the morning is spent teaching that course. Now, it doesn't mean your child is on Zoom for 3 hours straight, but it means that this is all they have to worry about. When we get to term 2, 4, and 6, only A, B, and C. And again, because we start with 1 class, we'll see how this goes. And when it comes time to hit the second term, we will have fine-tuned, we'll have items, we'll have been able to get feedback. We can see quite what exactly the hours will be and how that will work. Will that be every day? Will that be ABC, then A, then B, then C, then ABC? We'll be able to do those things. But again, because we start with 1 term, 1 course, nobody's overwhelmed. The afternoons can be consecrated to office hours, remedial, answering questions, making the students have a lot of power in taking control of their learning without feeling overwhelmed. I don't have to take control of 7 courses. The first term is 1 class. And there's somebody there to assist me. And he knows me, I'm the only one he's worrying about, it's the only class. And then when we go to term 2, 4, 6, and 3, 5, and 7, there's only 3 classes. I'm not overwhelmed, I'm successful, I learn a lot, and I'm ready for what is much more modern learning. If you look, those of you who have the chance to have had some learning in some ways, post-secondary, whether it's trades or academic, you know that that's very powerful. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, in secondary, this first 5-week term will also include the Common Sense media, which makes sense with more virtual learning, and the big block of time for instruction can include both synchronous and asynchronous learning. So there may be a Zoom meeting where all students are there at the same time, and there may be also a time where you are with your teacher and then you go away, maybe you read something, or if you're in culinary, maybe you, I think Amy used the example of maybe you julienne some carrots, and then you come back and you talk about it, or you show what you've done and have a discussion. And so that part where you're sort of offline, that's asynchronous and people doing their own thing. So there's some flexibility in this. And also just we are also looking in the secondary wing with the secondary staff about we're looking at more social emotional support for our students. So making PAC both a place where students are working on productivity skills and other skills, and also a time to connect in social emotional ways to make sure that we are cultivating a sense of belonging in middle and high school. Anything I missed, Richard, between the two of us? Okay, yeah, you can put some questions in the...
I feel there's a lot of positives, but I'm open to questions.
Thank you. All right, let's let Brian now, in his elementary principal role, explain what school is going to look like in the fall in the elementary wing.
Yeah, thanks, Martha, and well done, you guys. You know, I think one of the things at the elementary level, we listened to the staff survey and the parent survey, and we had surveyed students too. And through listening to kind of the feedback we received about this last spring, we used those as our lenses as we created our model in guiding us moving forward. So one of the things we're doing too is we have a main academic block, which will be in the elementary schedule, and parents will be able to see this. We're working towards getting kind of a one-page information piece that will have what the tentative elementary schedule looks like. With that, though, we've also heard parents and heard student feedback about making connections in small groups. And so we set up support small groups with making those connections, both in academic, where there's academic needs, and where there's maybe a language need, or maybe whatever the need is, and having those groups designed so that they can meet the needs of the kids. These are small groups supported by both the teachers and by our classified staff members. And then in addition, much like the secondary model, we want to focus on that social-emotional connection and healing and creating that class meeting concept. And at the elementary, we used class meetings for a while. And it's definitely a tool that helps us create that social-emotional connection for kids, and helps kids connect with their teachers as well. And so we have that in the learning blocks, and that's a morning learning block session. So you would have maybe a class meeting at first, academic block, and then small group sessions. So that's kind of the intent of it, and then lunch. Teachers would then be available with office hours for students or parents who had questions or needed clarifiers or needed just help just working through some of it. And much like the secondary schedule, both the synchronous and asynchronous options would be something we want to pursue, giving kids both the opportunity at times to engage with their classmates in the virtual world, as well as take a break, step away, engage with whatever they're engaging with on task there, and then bring it back and share. And so that's really kind of that virtual learning model and that collaboration and meeting some of those needs that we gleaned from the survey. So one of the things that the elementary team is doing too, and this is individually by teachers, is they're looking at some sort of an experiential learning opportunity where kids are able to take a task and either go outside with the learning, create whatever the task is, learning environment, and then report back, or B, have some setting as we phase into a phase-in process where we're able to get small groups of kids of 5 or less together and have a learning component happen there. So that's a piece that is going to be optional for teachers and encouraged, as well as just being mindful of teachers' comfort level as far as engaging with kids. So one part to that kind of syncs up with it is the first 2 weeks of school. We want our elementary teachers to really connect with their families to support that bond and that connection. And so the first 2 weeks of school will run kind of a model that's similar to like conferences, but it'll be more in that virtual world. So teachers will be setting up times where they meet with families and the students and being able to have one-on-one sessions with the teachers. So that's just an opportunity just for teachers to connect with our parents and our students to connect with the teachers, and just a great way to start the year. Just as we kind of look at the schedule itself, one of the things we want to focus on just as we kind of look at the challenges is, what is that potential phase-in model going to look like? And that's something that we want to be mindful of. We want to get the year started and running and going, and then we want to gather feedback from our families just to see how it's going. At some point, the county is going to say, okay, you can start phasing in or start having the opportunity to bring kids back. And we want to be mindful about that and look at groupings that are healthy, that maybe have interacted together, and just be able to support that piece where kids are able to engage with their teachers or maybe in small groups. That's going to be a whole different plan and a whole different set of safety protocols and procedures, obviously guided by the state or by our county health official, and just being able to navigate some of that transition too. Overall too, we're going to look at these plans, and depending on where the COVID is and what's going on there, we want to have check-in points, maybe about around the quarter time, which is approximately end of October, first part of November, and get feedback to see how it's going. At that point too, we also want to evaluate with our county health officials, what are the next steps and what are the next actions, and look at, as we phase back in, what does that look like, and what are people's comfort levels as far as both in the world of teaching and educators, as well as what are the parents' comfort levels. So that's kind of an overview of the elementary plan. Like I said, we're going to get a kind of a one-page snapshot out, and just with a schedule and with just a little more information. In the current plan that's on the webpage, there's a lot of detail in there and questions. And we have to think back at the time the plan was created. It was like, middle of June or end of June when that plan was created. And we were all thinking kind of a blended model. And so since the announcement a few weeks ago and the shift towards the virtual learning model, more attention's been put towards the virtual learning model and allowed us to dig into that deeper and support programs there.
May I ask a question? I'm new to these forums. Are we answering questions that are in the Q&A now, later? How do we do this?
Richard, what we are going to do is give each of the panelists an opportunity to tell about the restart plan from the perspective of their role. Then we will answer questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we will answer the questions that come in during the event.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Brian. Now we will hear from Kathy Booth, who will talk to us a little bit about special services and what that's going to look like.
Good evening. How is everybody? We are focusing right now, of course, on the remote schooling, and there will be some exceptions to remote schooling for students who have very high needs. So we will be meeting with some of them, keeping safety precautions for our staff and for the students. Some students will be brought in and we will talk with those parents individually about how we're going to do that. In the meantime, for the other students that are all working remotely, we will have paraprofessionals assigned to them and also case managers for them. And we'll also be looking at, as Brian was saying, if we have to when we start to phase in, we might prioritize some of the students to come in either more often or more quickly to the face-to-face learning. So that will evolve as things evolve. We want to also keep in mind when we do that to keep the students involved with their peers that are not having IEPs, so that they are still in the general education population. We do have some students that we put off evaluation, so parents might be asking about that. And I just had a webinar a few hours ago or an hour ago, and I'm still processing all that. But basically, any evaluations or IEPs that were put off because we could not meet in person will still need to be done virtually to some degree, but we need to complete them within 30 school days of the beginning of school. So by the end of October, we should have all those caught up. And it's going to be a learning opportunity for us to figure out how to do evaluations remotely. And so please be patient with us as we learn. And your kids are important to us. We also are concerned about their social emotional development. And that's why they will have someone that they can go to. We'll say, you are assigned to XYZ person. And they will be their go-to person. They'll be available in the afternoons for those remediations that Brian and Richard were talking about. So we're moving along and your kids are important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Claudia again, who started us off tonight. She's going to talk about a really exciting open air enrichment program that's a collaboration between the school and the library and the Family Resource Center. Claudia.
Thank you, Martha. So during this conversation, as I've represented the Lopez Island Parent-Teacher Association with the Restart Committee, I got to know a little bit about some of the things that impact the school as we make this decision to go virtual. I'm also here at the library in my role. I get to see a lot of the state requirements for our own public library to be able to host people inside the library. And at this point, phase 2 has a lot of ramifications behind the scenes about how we need to protect not just the public, but our staff as well. And seeing as the school and the Family Resource Center and many other organizations are also faced with this reality, I began a conversation with a couple of organizations about what we could do, and in my own organization, what we could do to offer to families an enrichment opportunity for their children. So the Lopez Island Library, along with other community organizations, as you heard, the Family Resource Center, also the school, we are in conversation with the Lopez Solid Waste Disposal District. We're in conversations with the Conservation Corps, with the Bureau of Land Management. We are in conversations for creating an open air enrichment program for this fall 2020. This would be a predominantly outdoor program on site at the Lopez Island School District with some indoor time in larger group spaces in the school building. We are proposing that the initial groups be divided into age categories of 1st through 4th grade and 5th through 8th grade. This program would be offered 3 afternoons a week. Families could register for 4 weeks at a time for a session that would include a bagged lunch, homework help, some other avenues for integration, story time, any kind of intervention needs that would be available for those with specific, perhaps learning barriers in their home. Not learning language barriers in their home is what I meant to say. Also an enrichment period facilitated by a Lopez School District enrichment teacher, which it is unclear whether teachers will be able to be present on site with us, but what we are hoping to do is have that person be virtual while there is an actual, should we say, camp program staff leading the program, the enrichment online. So whether that be art or some kind of PE or any kind of enrichment course. The other thing we're looking at is some electives where children who need to be there longer in the day, as opposed to as opposed to children who might want to leave earlier based on age level and just the reality of being outside of the home for a whole afternoon, would be facilitated by some community partners. And so with that, we are looking at various individuals who have agreed to want to give up their time for a certain subject matter based on some kind of unique or creative endeavor, anything from a sports drilling camp to a wacky science club to an optional maybe perhaps language conversation class for supplement some of the languages that are being taught by teachers. And so those are some of the things in the works. I want to stress that this is a very, very preliminary look at what we can do. There is much to do still to have this approved by our county health doctor, Dr. Frank James, the unions and the school with whether they can provide some amount of staff for that. We're conscious of the fact that we also are limited by the number of students that can participate based on how we are designated. So the last thing I wanted to say is, why is this an option? Why go this route? From my experience on the steering committee, I learned that over 60% of staff employed now at the school are in a high-risk category or age out of being on site. So we have the reality that a lot of our population that teaches our children regularly are vulnerable to COVID, and it is our priority to protect them and to have them be as safe as possible during this time. We realize that guidelines for outdoor recreation are less strict, so we're hoping to implement that as much as we can into our planning. We wanted to provide an enrichment opportunity for our children that was not restricted by certain curriculum or standards that the school must abide with. And we realize that caring for our children during this time is a community effort. I feel strongly about this. I feel that as parents, this is our time to engage more fully in how we educate our children. And that expectation cannot be the sole responsibility, in my personal opinion, of the school while facing this unprecedented complication of a worldwide pandemic. So I'm eager for any of you to reach out to me at the library at librarian@gmail.com if you have an idea or a course you're interested in taking, of teaching, something you really want to impart on the youth of our school. We would love to have you be a part of this plan. And hopefully, as we integrate into a phased learning approach, this could supplement for those children that just need a little bit of interaction outside of home. And I know that's true for mine. Thank you.
Thanks, Claudia. All right, let's hear now from John Shaw, our school chef, about what school lunches can look like in the fall.
Hey, everyone. It was interesting for the kitchen to put this plan together as we had basically been doing it in the spring. So we felt very prepared. So as we continue to go into distance learning, the school cafeteria will continue to provide breakfast and lunch on a delivery basis with the same, quality ingredients, fresh fruits, vegetables, baked goods, and milk that we were serving in the spring. Unfortunately, the big change is that the federal funding that provided the free lunches in the spring is no longer available. It is no longer considered to be an emergency, so that we are having to go back to charging for meals. So breakfasts and lunches will be charged at the same rate as though your child was in school and charged to their account in the same fashion. Which brings me to an important point that, if you are in the free and reduced category, your meals will continue to be free and reduced. And OSPI and the Child Nutrition Services of Washington have really been stressing that people's economic reality might have changed more than they have realized this year. And we're encouraging everyone to apply for the free and reduced program. There's, if you don't apply, you can't get it. And we're trying to serve as many free lunches as we can, because that's what makes us happy. That paperwork is available on the school website in the for parents category. And I'd also like to take this time to plug the PEBT program, which you will also be enrolled in when you fill out this paperwork if you qualify for free and reduced meals. The state of Washington is running extra food assistance, and the last day of sign up is August 31st. So if you're already receiving food assistance, you've automatically been enrolled. And if you are eligible and you fill out the free and reduced paperwork, you will also be enrolled. So it's a great source of a little extra money to families. And I highly encourage everyone to sign up for it. I think that's about it. Our plan is to just keep doing it like we did in the spring. We'll be sending out an email to families late next week with some further information and a link to fill out the form to sign up for lunches, which will be, again, very similar to what it was. You'll fill out a short survey, and then we will respond to you with where you are on the schedule and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jesse, will you give us some info on technology, please?
Absolutely. I'm not really sure where to start, but I would like to start with just expressing gratitude towards Sir John and his kitchen crew and the garden crew. They did an amazing job last year. They do really good work, and they've been doing an amazing job through the summer in the garden, and I'm really excited to see what that's all going to look like going into the semester. I also would really like to thank folks who have come up with this schedule and the ideas going forward. It's very thinking outside the box. It sounds very, like it might be the best thing for everyone involved. And then also thanking the library for hosting this town hall, which means that I don't have to do it, which is good for once. Technology, yeah. I mean, and my final gratitude, I almost forgot, is thank you so much, Lopez community, for voting yes on the technology levy. it's going to be such a huge benefit for our students and for our school. It's just really hard to put that into words, just how grateful I am and how much of a good thing it really is for everybody. And the technology levy from 2016 going forward which has let us relatively seamlessly move into this world of virtual learning while we need to. And while it's been said many times that this is not the most ideal situation for us, we were doing the best with what we have. And the best case scenario worked out where we were able to use technology that was purchased by tax dollars to provide that connection between teachers and their students and families and the teachers and whatnot. So moving forward, we are still using the same devices for the students that were provided to them previously. And those devices, I believe we made a really good choice with. They're still doing really, really well. Elementary devices are going to be refreshed next year, but the current Chromebooks are working great. And so obviously students who have been using the Chromebooks in the past, and our students who have been using the Windows one-to-one devices, the Lenovo's, are going to, basically they're going to be doing something very similar moving forward. What we really have to worry about right now are the students who are in that transitional phase, and really give them and their families as much support as we possibly can. And I'm speaking specifically about the 5th graders going into 6th grade, and then the kindergartners coming in the 1st and the 1st coming in the 2nd. And we have some changes coming. I very much want to work with teachers with what their plan is and really support them. And we're talking about deploying Chromebooks in the 1st grade. I'm not sure about kindergarten and how we're planning on getting those families connected because of the shift in elementary positions. But just know that going forward, we plan on giving as much support as possible and working with families and getting the training. And I have to say that I'm really, really excited and happy that we're starting the year off with the digital citizenship curriculum. That is so important for our kids, learning how to use technology responsibly. I think is the single most important thing that could be taught in schools right now. And sorry. Anybody with there's subjects who teach English or math or music or whatever it may be. I think navigating technology is the single most applicable and important thing that we could be teaching our youth right now. So that's just really fantastic. If you are a family who needs to have internet, if you need to have a device, if there's something that you need, please get in contact with me. So Rock Island is offering free internet to students and teachers who need it. So they've had this Access EDU program for a while now. So if you find yourself not having the technology you need, please reach out. If you have any concerns or questions, please reach out. Is that about cover it, Martha? You think that's about?
That's great. Thank you, Jesse. And all of this is ongoing. There will be more questions. There will be more information coming out. That's a great overview. Thank you. Del, is there anything you'd like to share with the community from your board member perspective and having attended the restart meetings?
Yeah, just briefly, Martha. First, I want to thank the many people that were on the restart committee. Most of these people are teachers and parapros who normally have their summer off, and they spent hours and hours and hours this summer putting together this document, this plan, and I really want to thank them for that. And just a brief summary of the board's stance on the reopening. A primary responsibility of the Lopez Island School Board is to provide for the health and safety of all students attending Lopez and Decatur Island schools. It is also our responsibility to provide the best possible education for these students. Therefore, we plan on returning to face-to-face in-class education as soon as it is deemed safe to do so. but we must listen to the science. So we're following the recommendation of the San Juan County Chief Health Officer, Dr. Frank James, and we will start school as scheduled on September 8th with a remote virtual learning model. So that's where we are. This thing has changed the last few months. It's going to change in the next few months. I think that's one thing we have to be prepared for, is flexible, because this whole thing is in a constant flux. So we'll do our best.
Thanks, Del. All right, everyone, I'm going to wrangle some questions now. So there are a couple of questions that I think were already answered. And one of them was about, was the grant for delivered meals renewed for this school year? John spoke to that. Is the school preparing to offer anything for kids who have existing IEPs? And Kathy answered that. We have a couple of questions here about remote learning. Well, not remote learning, but specifically how much time kids will spend online. So Richard, you and I can handle that on the secondary side. I mean, I spoke a little bit about what a block of time could look like. A student needs to be available during that entire block of time, but only part of that time, I imagine in most cases, would be spent entirely online. Do you want to speak a little bit more to that, Richard? And then we'll let Brian talk about that from the elementary perspective.
Obviously, it will be, let me make sure I'm not muted. Yeah. Obviously, it will depend on the subject matter, on the teacher teaching it, on the time of the year. I mean, there are many variables. But the intent is definitely not to be online all the time. For example, most probably my first course this year during the first term will be Cornerstones of Thought, which is literature and philosophy. I don't intend, even though possibly the class would be from 9:15 to 12:15, that doesn't mean we're in a Zoom meeting from 9:15 to 12:15. It could mean that at 9:15 we all meet, we discuss what we're going to cover that day, and I might say, okay, well today, for example, we're going to cover Plato's Cave. You've been given that assignment to read, you already have that document. Now I need you to go out and go read this. There are some questions I'd like you to consider. We will meet back again at 11:15. And then at that time, we could have a Kahoot to review what was read and to ask questions, to have student interchange ideas. It could be that there'd be small group learning. It could be that students are working on some project-based learning. So definitely not, oh, gee, 9:15 to 12:15, you're stuck in front of a screen. I would really like it, for example, and again, that's only for me, but for that class in particular, you have your reading, get yourself outside, sit in a good place, read and think, and write about it. No, there's no, I certainly have not heard that from anybody in the secondary. That was, oh, gee, let's plug you in front of a screen for 3 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours every day. That's not the point. We can be a lot more, but we are able now to be more creative because less preps for the kids, less prep for the parents, less prep for everybody, so you can really get creative on this.
Thanks. Yeah, that was my interpretation of our secondary conversation also. Brian, would you tell us a little bit about how much time you think elementary students, and of course it's a big range from primary kindergartners all the way to 5th grade, how much time you think they might be spending online, or what the elementary perspective is on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one that we've grappled with just as an elementary team. It's interesting because right now what we say and plan for right now may change after the first few days of school for the elementary. We know that our K2 kids, they're going to struggle with the amount of, any virtual time, and it needs to be intentional and it needs to be engaging for them. We know that the, 3, 4, 5 kids can engage in a little longer window. So we want to find parameters of what would be healthy for kids. And we know that kids are going to, build stamina for their virtual learning sessions. And that's kind of what we want to be mindful of as we move forward with this. So in a nutshell, we're looking at somewhere between 30 minutes at the younger ages, clear up to maybe 2 hours at the older ages. But that window will change and flux based on the kids' ability to engage and stay engaged, as well as just, you know, the materials that they're going to be exposed to. Much like the secondary model, we're going to have those same scenarios where kids may have the first, you know, first 5-10 minutes of a virtual lesson of the academic block might be the task and going over what the assignment is, and then the kids are going to break away and work on it, and then either come back or meet up the next day. So we're looking at, you know, somewhere between that 30 to 2 hour window in the mornings, and, you know, running that 5 days a week. That's kind of the intent. So there's a routine and a schedule that kids are used to doing and able to engage. And I know that that was one of the things in the parent survey that we heard, is that parents really appreciated the routine of things for their kids and their families, and could help them stay focused. So that's kind of that window there.
Thank you. I'm going to field a couple of questions here. One of them is, what are the opportunities for students to gather outside in appropriately sized groups to be with their peers or do structured educational and service activities? I think the latest guidance is that we can gather in groups of 5 or less. So what we're doing right now is trying to figure out what makes sense in that way. And that goes with another question: what will electives in high school look like? What if we don't want our children on an hour-long Zoom call for PE or art, for instance? I can guarantee you that Larry Berg is not psyched about teaching PE on Zoom. So again, we are really looking at what makes the most sense to gather in person in these small groups. As a secondary principal, I'm looking at PE, wood shop, you know, culinary, these kinds of classes where we're still trying to work that out, and that number changes as new guidance is given to us by Dr. James. So stay tuned for that, and that's really like the next level question, at least for me as a secondary principal, and I know Brian and the elementary staff has been talking about that too. Trying to get school started and then trying to figure out what does make sense for outside learning. Do you have anything to add to that, Brian, or did I speak for elementary?
No, you did a great job. No, that was right on, actually. I appreciate that. And yeah, so we want to be mindful of how can we create those outside learning opportunities for kids. One of the things that we're being creative with, as you heard Martha mention, you know, we're limited as a school system to just 5 people in a session and a learning opportunity. So when we have partner organization and we run like an after school club with an outside entity, they can have a larger group, up to almost 20 kids. So it allows for a little more flexibility to support our families. And that was really the intent of creating and working towards that open air plan or program that supports our families.
Another question is, what about Spanish-speaking children who need to learn to read and write in English, and parents that can't help at home with this? We just hired a new ELL coordinator. So she was interning with Lisa Geddes. So her name is Ariel Ott. We're excited to welcome her to the Lopez staff. I'm no longer the newest member of the LISD staff, and Ariel will be supporting students in their language needs at both the elementary and secondary level. There are several questions about transportation, and Brian, I think you might want to field those. They are both questions that have come in during the event and also a question submitted ahead of time. Maybe you could answer all of them in one fell swoop. One of them is just, will transportation be provided for any experiences that happen at school, including enrichment? And then there's another set of questions about, will bus drivers be able to drive students if they feel safe and are willing? Will bus drivers be paid their full salary if they're not able to drive? So can you just talk a little bit about, or a lot about transportation, and then answer all of those? Thanks.
Yeah, no, those are all really good questions. And you know, one of the things I just want to recognize is we don't have all the answers to all of the questions, but let me give you the information that I currently have right now. The transportation in the virtual model would not be working. And so there would not be transportation in the virtual model, but we do want to identify transportation in the phase-in model. And we want to follow the county health guidelines. And right now, the county health guidelines, we need them to spend a little more time on just what would that look like and what could be the safety protocols that our bus drivers would be able to follow. Would there need to be a second staff member on board the bus? Would temperature checks need to be done before the students get on the bus? So there's a lot of questions there. And this is all, very clearly that where the county health department would weigh in on and approve a plan or advise us in a direction to be able to support that. So those are all good questions around transportation. And so part of that is then would bus drivers be paid? And as a school system, my stance has been very clear. We want to make sure we support our bus drivers. And as people probably heard from the legislature, there's some concern about transportation and transportation funding. And for right now, this is such an unknown piece as the legislature, as we know, the legislatures will be coming back together here December, probably January, and talking about transportation. So we want to be supportive to our bus drivers and our community members. And so we want to keep them receiving enough hours that equates to them being able to get healthcare insurance. And that's really a priority for the district. So we'll have everybody will be able to get healthcare insurance. That's really our goal. And we'll figure out plans where our bus drivers, they may not be driving a bus, but they may be doing something else that engages with kids at a level that they feel comfortable doing. So there's more information here that's coming and to be worked out. So I appreciate the question.
Thanks, Brian. Let's see, I'm going to answer a secondary question. Is Spanish 1 an option for secondary students this semester? Yes. We're in the process of hiring a Spanish teacher. We just posted the position. And so we will be interviewing and hopefully welcoming a new Spanish teacher for just for Spanish 1 at this point. Soon we should be announcing that. And another question here, will there be plans to help children who are struggling in certain areas, RTI specifically, so that for those of you who don't know, means response to intervention. So this is a little bit, there's an overlap, but this is a different than individual education plans that Kathy Booth was talking about. Will they be able to get some attention? On the secondary side, I'm going to speak to that. That's one of the reasons we have that afternoon time. That is, when we show you our schedule, it will say office hours / student support. And one of the reasons for that is so that we can work either small group or one-on-one with students who need us. And as Richard said, the beauty of this model of this actually addresses another question: how do we expect kids to pick up where they left off after each term? I'm assuming that's a secondary question. The idea is if you have the A, B, C term 2, and you're struggling in one of those areas, and then you move on to D, E, F, you could, during that time, as Richard Tetu said, get some additional support so that when you come back to A, B, or C, wherever it was you were struggling, maybe we front loaded some information for you, so you're seeing it for the second time, or whatever sort of support you need as a student. Brian, you want to talk a little bit about that on the elementary side?
Yeah, we're setting up so that we have, I mentioned this a little bit in the elementary plan, but there's going to be small group block times that as a short window of learning for kids with the intent that it's focused on learning needs or skill that they need further development on. That being said, too, so elementary also has office hours that are open for families and parents to connect with the teacher so they can get more one-on-one type contact, or maybe 2 kids talking about this or working on something. So we're trying to create in the schedule and be flexible to families, both their time and their needs of the students. So those are definitely something that we're planning for.
Thanks. All right, another question submitted ahead of time. These are similar questions, and I'm going to read both of them, and I may need some help answering them. How much flexibility will there be for families who are homeschooling but not part of parent-partner to take 1 or more classes through the school? So basically, go to school part-time and not be part of the parent-partner program. And then another question is about the parent-partner program. Will we be able to do our own hybrid schooling, as in homeschool one subject while having kids enrolled for others? So that's sort of the same question, but then will the parent partner program be able to accommodate everyone who wants to do this? Last year it filled very quickly. What options are there if that happens again? It's filled quickly this year also, and it is full, and we have a waiting list for parent partner. In terms of going to Lopez Island School part-time and homeschooling for part-time, Brian, I'm going to need you to address that question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's definitely one of those questions that is kind of outside the box. And so, like I said earlier, we don't have really all the answers, but this is one that I'd like to dig into a little deeper as we kind of move forward towards the start of school. So what I'll do is I'll give you the information that I currently have right now. Right now, you know, we want to figure out what that parent partner class, what that partnership would look like. So if there's specific families that are looking at having a blended model, which we've done before with the brick and mortar system and the parent partner system, the challenge is going to be is usually like a student would be a parent partner for like math or something, or art, or something like that. And our schedule is going to be different. So we might be focusing in the classroom academic blocks more on reading and writing. And there might not be a math component for like the first week or second week or whatever it happens to be. So there's going to be some flexibility with the learning blocks, and that's going to create definitely kind of a challenge if you're wanting to do like a parent partner math program or parent partner reading program or something little along the lines of the core academic areas. So that is going to need to be teased out further, and more detail is going to need to come from that. So I appreciate the question, and anybody who has, if you have that question, I would encourage you to email me specifically so we can kind of figure some more details out and glean some more information to help develop a plan that will support you and your child in next year's model.
All right, we have answered all the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and I'm working my way through the questions that are coming in quickly. So I'm answering those in order. So outdoor activities to supplement online instructions. In terms of outdoor activities together, like kids coming together, I think I answered that earlier, that is a little up in the air still, and that we are looking for opportunities, making sure that we are not getting kids of more than 5 together, and that the teacher feels comfortable with it also. But if you're talking outdoor activities that are given as part of a lesson that students would do asynchronously from their own homes, that's up to the individual teacher. So if that's something that's important to you, if it's important for your child to get off the computer and be outside as part of learning, I think that it would be a wonderful thing for you to let teachers know that. Let's see, hybrid model available. So right now we're mostly going to be virtual. In terms of an actual hybrid model where kids are coming to school part of the time, like all kids are coming to school part of the time, and other kids are coming to school the other part of the time, and then kids are at home, I don't know if we will be moving through a hybrid model before we all come back to school the way that we know and love, or if we will be virtual and then come back to school. I just don't think we know that yet. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, that absolutely is. And obviously, we'll keep families kind of posted, and our intent is not to be that whole, like we had this last spring, kind of the all of a sudden one day we're all at school and the next day nobody's at school model. We really don't want to do that. We really want to allow families to prepare and adjust and make an informed decision, whether they want to send their child back or whether they want to stick with a virtual model, or, we want to be able to have options for families to be able to choose from when that time is right. Obviously, we're going to work with, our county health official and navigate plans that are very similar. And most likely what will happen is all 3 island school districts will be doing the same thing about the same time. Dr. James is very clear about keeping us all kind of on the same page and moving forward and making those recommendations in that model. So I would foresee more information and announcements and allowing families enough plan time and preparation to be able to adjust at a rate that they feel comfortable with.
Thanks. You know, and back to the outdoor activities, that does actually happen in some classes. And Amy just reminded me in the chat that has happened in the sustainable agriculture class, even in the spring, and that makes sense.
Yeah,
all right.
And Martha, just to piggyback on that, I think there's going to be some classrooms that are going to lend itself to those opportunities a little bit more than other classes. And we want to be supportive of that, but we also want to be safe around that and have our safety protocols in place. So there would be, you know, those opportunities. And that's something that'll have more information and further detail as we get closer to the start of school.
Nice. In-person instruction available. There are a couple of students with special needs that we will be working with one-on-one, and in that afternoon support time, there may be opportunities to work with an individual student for a paraprofessional or a teacher to do some support, some tutoring for an individual student, and we'll work those situations out on a case-by-case basis. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. Those scenarios are going to be the exceptions to the rule. We're going to have a few scenarios where we have a few students we've identified with high needs, and we're going to support them the best we can inside the school system. Those other kids who may have other needs to support, it may take us a little while to get that system up and running, or at least identify a plan for those kids and then create a transition plan as well. So in addition to the students' needs, we've also got to identify staff who are able to work with these kids. And as Claudia had mentioned earlier, through this process, we learned that 62% of our staff aren't able to work with people under this current condition. And so we've got to also survey our staff and make sure that their comfort levels at a place that they're willing to engage with kids, and to make sure they're not a high risk category or live with somebody who's high risk, because that's a concern that we have too. We're very clear and support Dr. James's method and his advice about keeping our island safe and, you know, containing or minimizing any spread of the COVID.
Next question, can kids not do the PAC or PAC acronym, the emotional program? I do not know what that is. Does anybody on this panel know what that emotional program is? Probably it's a social emotional curriculum. Go ahead, Richard.
There are some components, I suppose, of that, but even last year, at least in my pack, which was 11th and 12th grade, there was not a lot of those issues dealt with. Now, it could evolve, but lots of PAC has to do with helping students be successful, whether it's a performance in dealing with deadlines, catching up on items, making up assessments, personal productivity of all kinds. So that's one component there. And then the PAC sometimes would split when we have club meetings. The ASB, for example, met every week, and that made for a pretty powerful ASB. Class meetings, other club meetings. So I don't quite understand. That sounds like an advisory portion of PAC, if we went to that.
Yeah, and that's a thing we've been talking about. I was thinking that this question might be a specific social emotional curriculum, PAC, that I'm just not aware of. But if you're the person that wrote that question down and we have not answered it adequately, feel free to email. I hesitate to ask anybody to send me more email, but please email us and give us more detail, and then maybe we can do a better job answering your question. The next question, this is definitely for you, Brian, because you have been in touch with the other island superintendents. Are similar approaches being taken on other islands, both public and private brick and mortar schools? What do you know, Brian, about what's happening on Orcas and San Juan?
Yeah, no, happy to give an update. And so to let everybody know, I meet with the other island superintendents on a weekly basis. And we have a little time where we meet together, and actually 4 islands, because we include Shaw as well. But and Shaw's kind of its own entity. They've got small enough numbers that they can do a little different model, and they've ran that past Dr. James. And it's interesting just to see how they're trying to support families there too. That being said, Orcas, you probably seen Orcas put out their information last week. They're about a week ahead of both us and San Juan Island. They did their community forum at the beginning of last week, and then they did their special board meeting towards the end of last week, and have adopted the plan that has the 3 components. And then now they're currently working through the virtual learning models and getting more information out to families and more higher level of detail between now and pretty much the start of school. So all of us are following that same process, and just kind of have this very similar steps in there. And obviously we're running those steps in that process past our county health official. San Juan's doing the same thing we're doing. They're actually having a public forum here pretty soon, and then they're going to run their plan past their board here either the end of this week or next week. So all very similar in those models, both identifying high need special ed students and creating a model where those kids can come in and have a certain amount of time and days that has in-person learning. And then everything's virtual. So that's the challenge. And then they're trying to create just anomalies like we are too. We mentioned like the sustainable farm class where they could go out to the field and there could be the small groups and that type of stuff. So they're identifying areas where they could do some of those things as well and engage kids, outside of the brick and mortar school system. So all in all, yes, we're all pretty much on the same page. We're all going to have the same results by the time we start school. And, we really want to be, collaborating as we work through this process together. And what's been nice is, we're involving Shaw and kind of getting some of their ideas and picking their brain on some of the things that they're doing that's creative as well. So yeah, that part is a huge collaboration and a large amount of time invested in that process.
Here's another one for you, Brian. What happens at the school? What happens when school resumes in person?
Well, you're going to hear me here.
But we do not feel comfortable returning in person. Yeah. Would students have to switch to parent partner? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be, I alluded to that, a little bit of that question earlier. And like I said, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to have a survey that'll go out at some point once we get closer to that phase-in model and glean out where families' comfort level is as far as coming back or waiting or whatever it happens to be. We want to be responsive to both the families who are, because we did the survey at the end of the year, and 1/3 of the people on the survey said they're ready to start tomorrow. 1/3 of the people said we're going to wait to see what happens over the summer, and then 1/3 of the people said we're going to go virtual. And so that survey really told me that we have about 3 different groupings of folks and just in their thinking process. And I know as more information comes out, I know that thoughts have changed and ideas or concepts or models have changed a little bit. So that's okay. We want to, when we look at the phase-in part of our plans, we want to be responsive to the needs. And part of those needs are going to be some of those families who want to engage at a continue to engage at a virtual level, and some families who want to come back to the brick and mortar system. One option that we haven't fully worked out is, could we videotape our lessons, and could that be, recorded, and could other families access that if they were in the virtual learning model? That's an option. It's a huge amount of data, and tech department's been looking at that and working with it a little bit. We don't have a clear plan there yet, but ideally we would want to create a scenario where families could access the learning that's going on in the classroom and stay virtual at the same time. And then as they feel more comfortable, phase in into the school system when their comfort level is at a place where they're ready to go.
Martha, I would like to come back one question ago.
Sure.
Because I know in the question, I don't know if I'm reading too much in the question to the parent, whoever it was at Broad, but where did we come with this? Absolutely truthfully, at first, it was many of us just middle of the night type thinking. But since then, if you look at other districts, small and big, curiously, after we started working on it, suddenly we start noticing that small and very large district, Tahoma, Federal Way, and a big district have gone to that model of cluster teaching because it makes sense. You can fulfill so many needs this way. At the high school level, block scheduling has been done for decades, but this is beyond block scheduling. It's cluster scheduling. And yes, it is true that most of the time that's been seen at post-secondary level, but we're not the only district. Now, I guess serendipity, a bunch of districts obviously started thinking, and now it's coming out that you'll notice many people are doing this. So if you wonder, is it done elsewhere? Practically at post-secondary, it's been done for years by very successful colleges. High school level has been block scheduling, but this is not, we're going beyond that. We're going to cluster scheduling, and that should be even more powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving a little more insight into sort of the birth of this plan and what other districts are doing. Or how much supervision from parents will be expected in elementary? And to clarify, how much time will parents be needed to support little ones? And I would imagine that means supporting them with the online or with the virtual learning. Can you speak to that, Brian? Elementary.
Yes. So there's a couple parts there. That's my apologies. I was trying to read the questions too myself. So how much supervision from parents? Let's get to that part. That's a good question, and that's a fair question, and I appreciate the question because I don't have an answer to what the expectation is, because part of it is going to be based on your child's need there. What I do want to let parents know is that there's an opportunity if your child's in the virtual learning platform and they're engaged with the teacher in the lesson, and all of a sudden at the end of the lesson you ask your child, well, what are you supposed to be working on? And they're like, I don't know, I don't get it. We set up those office hours so that you can contact the teacher or reach out to the teacher and be able to say, okay, my child didn't quite get that. Can you help clarify this? And that really is really intended to do two things. One, we want to build responsibility in the kids so that they're responsible for their own learning. And two, that allows you as a parent a resource to go to so that if your child didn't fully understand what was going on in the classroom, that they're able to connect with the teacher and get more information as well and get support. And that's a good conversation with the child too about how to help manage what they're supposed to be doing in the learning, virtual learning world. So the expectation is kind of, what does your child need and how much can you allow and instill a sense of responsibility with your child, as well as how can you support them and what's your avenue for supporting them. And so trying to create that balance there is really what we're trying to work hard with. And I really encourage any parent who feels like their child's not getting that virtual learning to reach out to the teacher, and we can set them up in the small groups or set up another grouping that they can get more of the instruction at a different level, in a smaller, more intimate level for their child. So we want to be supportive of that environment and engaging with that environment so the kids are feeling they're able to engage and learn. So appreciate that question. There was a second question there and I just saw it disappear, Martha. What was that second question?
Sorry, let me find the question again. And the question, another clarifier on that last question is it's referring to K2.
Oh,
primary.
That helps, yeah.
It was just a clarifier on the same question. How much time will parents be needed to support little ones?
Yeah, I would hope, to be honest with you, as a parent here, I would advise parents to be there at the onset, at the start, when your child first starts meeting with their teacher, show them how to log onto your computer, show them how to engage with their teacher, and show them some of just the simple features of muting and or whatever it happens to be. And then step back, allow your child to engage with the teacher and their classmates and have that be their time with their classmates. They're gonna at some point ask for help or, mom, dad, can you turn this off type scenario. That's okay. And there's gonna be times where you wanna just listen from afar. So we had a number of families who set up at the younger ages would set up their computer in the like in the kitchen or living room or wherever somebody was working, and just be doing what they needed to do as an adult, but yet be mindful that their child may ask for something and could pop over and help and assist. Or, like I said, we'll still have the opportunity for parents and students to connect with the teachers during the office hours.
Thanks. Next question. Any thoughts on support for families that have working parents, specifically those that work outside the home? Man, yeah. I get that. I've been thinking a lot about working parents. I was a working parent outside the home. And one of the open air enrichment is something that we are hoping will be helpful, not just so your children can connect and be outside and have enrichment, but also that it would be helpful in terms of childcare and support for working families. But we know that's just 3 days a week in the afternoon. Brian, any other thoughts on that?
No, I absolutely agree. I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenges schools have, is those double working families. And I know some of the things I've heard from families already is that they're going to reach out to some of the older kids that maybe their family's been getting together and they've got their social group that they're engaging with during this COVID time. And they're going to reach out to those families who have the older siblings who are maybe middle school or even high school, and have them help monitor or engage with the kids in the afternoons, or partner or help them with the learning groups, that type of stuff too. So this is really that scenario where, Lopez, we've got to help each other out, and we really need to be there for each other. If you have a scenario where you're in a situation where you might need some help, we do have former teachers or retired teachers who have been contacting me saying, hey, I can do some tutoring with kids, let families know. So I have just a couple of names at this point, but if there are other families and you have a group of families you've been working with, I really encourage families to create that pod concept. You've heard of pods working in other states and across our nation as far as these family groupings that have been socializing, and their kids are talking about getting together for those learning academic sessions, and they rotate either houses or they rotate locations. But we want to be able to just be mindful of, being able to track any COVID cases. So keeping those groups, consistent is important. And Dr. James is very clear. He supports that interaction with those families. At the same time, he wants you to be mindful of keeping it limited as well. So this is going to be one of our tougher ones. We hope that like you said, the open air program supports families and can do some of that. We also encourage families to use the resources in the community and connect with their friends, or have somebody that can support them as well. So something we'll continue to work on. I think it's not done yet. There's by no means.
Yes, we also want to say that as part of our thinking with our after school program, this has been part of why we wanted to be able to provide some afternoons for parents would get some childcare. We're also in partnership with local organizations that we mentioned, and we are encouraging them to make some programs available Thursday and Friday afternoons so that we're able to cover the week a little bit better for working parents. Our other reality is that we have these guidelines that really restrict how many of us can gather, and just the reality of finding staff to be able to populate these pockets of areas where we need a little bit of support. So we're hoping if we have staffing and a budget, to expand our after school program to maybe even encompass all 5 days. We're starting off with 3 days because we believe that's what we can handle at this time. But again, I think a lot will depend on what we are ultimately able to have the county approve for us, whether we're a recreational program and that allows more people, and then how much staffing we're able to provide so that we are able to gather in groups. And I believe there was a question on the chat about how many children would be able to engage in this outdoor plein air activity, and we don't know yet. We are hoping for the maximum amount, and that will depend on what we are able to staff for and what we are able to have approval for. And number two, are we prioritizing essential workers? Absolutely. That is one of our goals. That's something the school has reached out to us about being able to provide at least some sort of care for essential workers and their children, not for you, essential worker, but for your children. So we're hoping that will help ease a little bit, that at least we got you covered for 3 days if we're able to pull this off. So fingers crossed, and good juju juice or whatever you do for us to get a maximum number. I mean, I'm hoping we can accommodate about 50 kids. So that is my goal, knowing that some people will not feel comfortable doing this option, and it is optional. So thank you.
Okay, I have 3 secondary questions to answer, all 3 of which are sort of difficult. One of them is, how can students going for the honors diploma get all 4 years of Spanish if we are not offering, well, this last thing isn't part of the question, but it's implied, if we are not offering all of the Spanish courses that are usually in the schedule in the absence of Lisa Geddes during her year leave of absence. And I don't know. I am assuming that there are very few students that are caught in that middle place of needing to take a class in the progression this year that's not Spanish 1. And I'm hoping that if that is an issue, that we will be able to somehow through the parent partner program fill in those gaps. Richard, you are a language teacher. Can you offer any insight into how this typically works? And Brian also.
Well, for one thing, I got to admit that it's news to me that you need 4 years for honors diploma. I don't think that's correct. I think there's some,
3 years.
Yeah, 3. And I cannot speak for Spanish, and I can't speak for the situation. It's the first time in over, I've been here 33 years, my 34th year, I think. And we've probably had Spanish now for 20 years, maybe. The first time, but we have not had a capacity to do all those classes. But I suppose, yeah, parent partner, BYU, correspondence, and there's also, I suppose, there would be waivers, appeal to the board, substitutions. This is a question that needs to go to probably our counselor, who is the genius on this, who knows how to deal with weird situations. That's not, we've had students show up as 11th graders, they want honors, things like that. For myself, I'm going to be teaching both French 2 and 4 at the same time this year. This all said, we're the exception, and the only reason we've been able to have 2 languages, frankly, is unlike other schools, we've done a cycling. For the price of 1 class, 1 language, we teach 2. We've been able to do this. Many much larger schools only offer 1 language. So this is a pleasant problem to have in some ways, not pleasant for the student who feels stuck right now, but, and repeating myself, first, I think it's 3 years, not 4. Number 2, there's other avenues. If the avenues are not palatable, I would suppose Mr. Auckland can help us here. There'd be appeal, there'd be support. We're Lopez, we're not Seattle School District here. We'll work with the student.
Yeah, Richard, you're right on. It is 3 classes, and there is an appeal process, and I absolutely support COVID-19 being part of that appeal process, because having a national pandemic creates an anomaly in any student's schedule. So I would say if there's a kid who's working hard for that honors diploma or certificate, we would support that as a school district. We always have, and we work hard with our kids to help them achieve those goals that they want to achieve.
Hey, thank you, Brian and Richard. All right. This is a really good question also, and a difficult one. With secondary schedule switching between ABC term and DEF terms or blocks, how will tests, especially comprehensive exams, be approached? For example, will there be tests only on the content covered in 1 5-week block, or on the content covered across the entire course? I love this question because I really can get into assessment and formative assessment, summative assessment, assessment for learning, assessment of learning. I would imagine that we need to have a good conversation on the secondary level about interim assessments. And also maybe a small review when when the classes pick back up after that 5-week period. That's a good time to test for, or at least formatively test for retention. So great question, and I'm writing it down so that I can make sure that we add that to the secondary long list of things we need to talk about still.
And again, I think that has to do with the subject.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a sequential course or a course is non-sequential. For example, math and world languages are sequential courses, while philosophy is not sequential. There are some basic items you need to teach. I also find it as a really interesting challenge for both the student and the teacher, because you have subsection, you'll want to wrap up a section for the end of that term. But talk about knowing if you really learned something, if you come back to it 5 years later. It'd be kind of like saying, oh, gee, income tax report, I have to relearn it every year. If you have to relearn it every year, then you probably not learned how to do your income tax report. Some things you'll forget, some essential things you'll try to remember, and the more you do it, the more you remember it. It's real life.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, good one.
All right. Here's a question that I also love and is difficult. And if it helps, this too is keeping me up at night. Honestly, when will kids know their schedules? This is to the secondary principal. Yeah, I want to know that too. And here's the thing. I mean, I have three secondary students, and they're already wondering if they will get them before the first day of school. I'm so sorry. I can tell you all these things. You know, we were in the middle of figuring out the budget in the spring, which impacts the secondary schedule. We weren't sure how school was going to open, how all of this was going to happen, but I definitely get, and was just talking to our office coordinator, our secondary office coordinator this afternoon about when this can happen. We know for sure that G, again, is the first term. So that we know what classes are being offered in the first term. So we should be able to get that information to students. And some of this is related to the switching over from skyward to cumulative. So, which is not certainly meant to sound like a lot of excuses to you. And I am just sorry that kids don't know this yet. With all the unknowns, your child should definitely know what one class they're taking the first 5 weeks of school. Thanks for asking. 2 more questions. I know we're late, but these are really good questions, everybody. All right. Will there be coordination around the times that kids are required to be online for families that have multiple children? I don't know yet about that. I know that all of the learning is in the morning, which is both probably really, except for the office hours and the support of students that need extra support, either because they need a support in a class, or extra support because of an RTI situation. Students that need extra support in social emotional ways, but most of the actual synchronous and asynchronous learning is happening in the morning. That could be a real blessing for families to be able to plan around that, and it could also be tough in terms of internet. Does anybody else on this panel have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just my own experience with my own kids being in that world where we were all on the internet at the same time, it was a bit rough, and I totally empathize with families there. And I think what we want to do is be able to be flexible in some of that. We're trying to get to, so maybe the elementary starts a little earlier, and then secondary kids start, about an hour after elementary as far as their academic blocks. So we're trying to work out the details of that schedule now, and hopefully, you'll be able to see that schedule a little bit later, maybe next week or so. But we're mindful of that, and we know it's not going to be perfect at first, but want to recognize the challenges there, and that we're going to work towards something that's the best we can possibly deliver. So we'll get there.
Thanks, Brian. How will the 2-3 grade combined work with remote schooling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, so what's nice is that Miss Kendra, you know, she knows those third graders. She had them this last year, which is great. So she knows her kids there, and she's already got a familiarity with that. So she's learning the materials at third grade, and so that's a easy transition there. And then as the second graders come in, she already knows the second grade material. She's been the second grade teacher for the last few years. So that will work realistically in the virtual world pretty well for the most part. Granted, what will happen is there may be more small group sections in that class, and maybe a smaller large group section of time in the virtual world. So I would foresee that classroom in particular has a little different model than some of the other classrooms, just because trying to meet the needs of those kids. There will be some blendedness, and there'll be some crossovers with academic content and just programs, or you know, just aligning things to Common Core standards. So those standards are pretty similar at the beginning of the year with those two grades. So that's a easier combination to align. So but I foresee that just being, like I said, a little bit different than the typical classroom, with most likely a few more small breakout groups. But I'm still kind of just predicting right now, and not necessarily 100% sure what that will look like. And I will leave that up to Ms. Kendra, who's the expert in that room. So, and glad to have her back. So.
All right. Last question. Can homeschoolers attend the open air program? I think the answer is yes.
Well, that's a good question. I think we need to keep working through that program. I'm curious to see how many of our current kids are interested in it, and are just connected to it. So that's going to be something we're going to have to tease out a little bit. If it's 100% homeschooler, you know, that might be an option. If it's a partial homeschooler and here at school, that's a different option. And so I would foresee more information coming out about that. And I really appreciate that question, because I think it's a fair question to us, and it allows us to work on those things. And you've probably seen me from time to time looking down, I'm taking notes and writing down the questions. So trying to get more answers and more information. So, but appreciate that question for sure.
Yeah, I have been taking notes also. And does the program cost money? And Claudia's here in the room, and Claudia's saying a small fee.
Yeah.
A week.
We'll also have a tuition base too as well, part of that.
So we start at 5:30. It's 7:10. I want to honor everybody's time this evening, especially the panelists. I just want to say again, thank you to the library for hosting this event. And I want to especially thank the panelists that have answered questions and provided information. I hope that all of you listening and watching from home have felt like you left here knowing more than you did, that you feel like we have taken in your questions, honestly answered them based on what we know, and showed up as confident in what we know, and also really open and honest about the questions about the things we don't yet know, or the things we're still working out. And thanks to all of my Lopez Island School District colleagues who have worked this summer to help create this plan. We first had to create a plan with 3 different options, and then we finally got to zoom in on virtual learning. So we appreciate your patience. As Brian said, a glitch in the parent communication program, the way that we send emails out, like at this time, couldn't have been worse timing. But your patience and grace is just so appreciated in this moment. Does anybody have any last comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, just in closing too, Martha, well said, and just appreciate both the staff who have given up so much time during their summer to work this out. And we had, parents involved in that process and community members. And so just appreciate all the time, the weekly meetings and all the events and the emails and the reviews and the drafts and, gleaning information from state organizations and all of the work that goes behind the scene to create a 35-page document is enormous. And there's a lot of thought that went into this document. And with that thought, there's a lot of questions that came up through that document as well that we continue to try to answer and try to work through as well. So appreciate the team and working on that. And then just appreciate the Lopez community as we kind of move forward with this. We know we're not going to be perfect with this, and we're looking for feedback when it's not working well. And so there's things that are going to work well, we're going to like, and we're going to be ahead of other districts in, and there's going to be things that maybe aren't working as well. And so we need to know that. And really, we want to create a plan that's flexible and adjustable for families, meeting needs and meeting families where they're at and their capability as well. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time.
And Brian, where can they find that document that you're referring to?
Absolutely. So right now that plan is currently on our webpage. You can go to our webpage and
Under updates.
thank you, Kathy. I was going to say, I can't remember which category. Updates is where it's at. We'll email that link out to families probably tomorrow morning and get that out to folks. And I encourage people to take a look at the sections that apply to you. There's a lot of information in there that the state's requiring us to put in there as far as safety procedures and protocols. The state did require us to have 3 plans, and what are those, and identify those 3 plans. And so that is part of that process. And the board has a special meeting set up for Thursday at 5 o'clock just to kind of look at that, have a little more discussion, and then we'll see what happens next after that. So yeah, that's where we're at.
I'd like to suggest, as always, after all those years of being here, so much faster, so much easier, and so much more truthful if you just go straight to the person. If you have a question that one of us, if you have a question you think I could answer, just talk to me. I mean, you may not like the answer always, but I'll listen to you. But certainly it'd be so much easier than going to the Lopez rumor mill. Just ask. We mean well, we want to do well, we want feedback, and we want, most of all, I know it's cliche, but we're there for the kids. We're not there to nail a kid, we're not there to flunk a kid. We're there for them to learn. And if we can look at a silver lining here, this can be phenomenal what students will be able to gain from this environment. It could be powerful tools they will gain. We can mope, or we can go, geez, that I was there, I learned there.
Well said, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. And thanks to everybody. I hope you have a great evening. Let us know if you have questions. Come to the board meeting on Thursday, and we're in this together, everybody. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.